Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear brothers and sisters, today we have a new guest with a new subject. Our subject today is about investment. Today we have Mr. Jesse.reitberger, financial consultant. You are most welcome. Thank you for coming today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mr. Jesse, my first question is about financial investments. And I would like to know about how did you come first into this subject, in this project?
So it's a bit of an interesting story. So when it comes to the actual financial industry, I got started back in 2012. I had graduated university and I came back to Winnipeg, started working for a company, National Bank Financial Wealth Management. At which point, in 2014, I accepted Islam, and around that time, I started to do some research into how Muslims invest and how Islamic investing works, all of those types of things. And so around that time, I asked to start my own practice at National Bank, and I wanted to focus on Islamic finance and investments, but it didn't really work with their compliance department. So I moved on to a new company, IG Wealth Management, and here I'm specializing in helping Muslim families and business owners and professionals with their financial planning and investment needs, so they can meet their goals while still maintaining their ethical values.
Can you tell us about the basics in regards of the Islamic investing?
Absolutely. So one of the main basics of Islamic investing are that we want to follow what's in the Quran and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So essentially what that means is, as Muslims, we don't invest in anything that takes any interest, riba. Other than that, when we invest in things, we want to make sure they don't go against the teachings of the Quran. So we don't want anything in alcohol, gambling, tobacco, adult entertainment, weapons, war, conventional banks, and insurance. So any of these things that in the Quran, we're told are unethical, we want to avoid these at all costs. So those are the basics when it comes to Islamic finance and investing.
So what are the differences between Islamic investing and investments you would get at the bank?
So the main difference is interest, right? So the grand majority of investments that someone at the bank, an advisor, although well-meaning, will put you into something that contains interest, or conventional banks. I can't tell you how many clients have come to me saying, oh, my guy in the bank has promised me, halal investments or ethical investments. And the first thing I do is I look at their statement and I find investments in conventional banks, insurance companies, investments in bonds and guaranteed income certificates. All of these are interest-bearing and interest-using companies. So overall, when you invest at the bank, you're going to get something of that nature. When you invest with someone like me or someone who understands Islamic investing, they're going to go the extra mile to make sure that the investments you have are in good things like science and technology, healthcare, infrastructure, natural resources, precious metals like gold and silver. These are all considered to be investments that meet certain Islamic criteria. And so when you do an Islamic investment, you know that you're going to get those type of ethical sectors, as opposed to all the ones that I mentioned before that don't comply with Islamic rules.
How long have you been doing this Islamic investing?
So I've been doing this for almost 4 years now. Since I accepted Islam, I've basically been studying and trying to build portfolios and wealth management solutions for Muslims. Specifically, I got a certification as an Islamic finance executive from the Ethica Institute in Dubai in 2016. So from 2014 till now, I've done a total of 4 years and gotten some certifications along the way, so that to make sure that everything I'm telling you is in fact true when it comes to Islamic investing.
So that certificate from Dubai is the qualifications which you are based on in your work.
Yes, that's right. So all of the rulings and the things I say about Islamic investing come from the studies I did from the Ethica Institute. Further to that point is that when I am looking for a ruling or justification on any type of Islamic financial product, I seek out the the education I had, which is governed by this international board of accountants and Islamic financial scholars to look into all these Islamic investments.
What makes a good Islamic investment?
So after we've determined whether or not we actually have an Islamic investment, now the question is to whoever I'm dealing with. It all depends on you as a client. What are your goals? What is your time horizon? What are you looking to do? And based on those questions and a plan that we work on together, that'll determine what a good Islamic investment is. So for example, if you're looking to buy a house within a year, we might want to go for something a little bit more conservative with less risk. But if you've got 20 years before you're going to need your money, then it might be okay to take on a little bit more risk, because if there's more risk, in general, you make more profit.
Mm-hmm. So what is your advice for the newcomers?
For all newcomers, what I would suggest is everyone look to programs that are government funded, that issue government grants. So most newcomers are coming to Canada with young children they're looking to help get an education for it. They're looking to supplement their income, different things like that. So what I would say to newcomers, the first thing you should do, especially if you have young children, is start a registered education savings plan. A registered education savings plan, for every dollar you put in, the government's going to put in 20%. And that's to a lifetime maximum of $7,200. So for those families out there that have 5 kids, there's over $40,000 that's going to be available for their kids to go to school from the government, and that's on top of their own savings and their contributions. The other thing I would suggest, there are several families that I've dealt with that have come overseas that have children who have disabilities, whether it be from war or from different things. Well, the government has a program called the Registered Disability Savings Program, and with that program, for every dollar that you put into a registered disability savings program, the government is going to put in 3, to a maximum of $70,000 per individual. So potentially from the government, if you have children with disabilities, you could get up to $210,000 from the government.
So what about insurance? Because always it's a conflict. I mean, people talk about insurance.
Insurance is a really tricky subject, and by no means am I a scholar, so I'm not going to give a ruling on what's halal or haram. But the best advice I can give when it comes to insurance is, if you must take it, try to find some type of insurance that comes with guarantees in the contract and that comes with a return of premium. What does that mean? Well, the grand majority of insurance is sold this way. Okay, in the next 10 years, you pay us money. If anything happens to you, we keep your money. If anything happens to you, we'll pay you, $500,000. If nothing happens to you, we keep all your money. These contracts are terrible for 2 reasons. Number one, only 5% of them ever pay out their customers. And the other reason is they consume your wealth. Whereas you can get something permanent, right, where you can choose the investments. You can choose investments that avoid interest and alcohol and gambling, tobacco, all these bad things, and they have guarantees in there. So as long as you keep paying into them, you're guaranteed to get something if anything happens to you. And at any point, if you cancel it, you can get all your money back. So when it comes to dealing with insurance, look for things where you can get your money back, because otherwise you're wasting your money.
You know that there is the will in Islam.
Yeah.
And there is this, in the Islamic will, it's people go now to the lawyer and register it at the lawyer. Does that have anything to do with the Islamic finance in this case, if somebody is having a will?
Absolutely. Like, a will is one of the most fundamental components to building any kind of wealth in Canada, not just from an Islamic perspective, but under Canadian financial planning standards, if you are here and you're married, you need a will. And the reason a will is so important is because when something happens to you, they know how to split up your inheritance. And with Muslims, we have a very specific way of how everything needs to be split up. Now, a point I'm going to make about this, I'm not 100% sure about Islamic wills and things like that, but I do want to stress that Canadian law often supersedes religious rules. And so I have heard of cases where clients wanted to get an Islamic will, but they didn't speak to their family about the why they divided up their assets that specific way, and their family wasn't educated on the way an Islamic will is supposed to be done. And so what ended up happening was one of the children went to the court and was like, well, hold on, I got less inheritance because I'm a woman. This is discrimination and goes against Canadian law. And so the judge ruled in her favor, and then the money and assets were divided up in accordance with Canadian rules, not the Islamic ones. So if you are getting a will taken care of, especially if you want it done in the Islamic way, you need to make sure that you're talking to your family about it and saying, hey, listen, here's how we're going to divide things up, and here's why. Because the Quran says X, Y, and Z about my wills and estate, and so this is why I want it to happen. And as long as all your children are on board and the family understands why things are being done the way they're being done, then you shouldn't have any issues when it comes to your wills and different things like that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they come here, they want to buy a house.
Yeah.
And the mortgage of the house, and some people say against Sharia, some people say we have fatwa from that cleric and that, a lot of things. Was there any effort to do some Islamic way of housing?
Yeah. So there are a few options that we have available here in Canada for Islamic mortgages. So there's a few groups out of Toronto called IF Financial, Ichara, CDC. There's Zero Mortgage Halal. There's Amana Cooperative, I believe that's what they're called. And here in Winnipeg, they have a Assiniboine Credit Union. So all of these are Islamic financial products that have been approved by various Islamic scholars. In my personal opinion, if you are Muslim and you're trying to buy a house, I would recommend going through these first. Are they going to be perfect? I don't really think so. And the reason I say that is because there are some Canadian regulations in place that require certain contracts that need to be stated in principle, in terms of principal and interest. But the way they're set up and the intention behind them is to make it better than the current ones that exist at the bank. And so I think these Islamic mortgages are better than the ones that you can get at the bank. And from a more, community values point of view, I would say that for us as a Muslim community, what we need to be doing is if we can get home ownership, if we can, own land, different things like that, then the issue of us taking interest, or future generations taking interest, won't be there, because we'll be able to pass on our houses and our properties to younger generations, so they won't have to ask that question, oh, should I get a conventional mortgage? Now that being said, there are fatwas out there that say you can get a conventional mortgage. I certainly am not going to rule against that. I'm not a scholar, but I would say if you're going to go down this road to buy a house, try to go through one of these companies that offer some form of Islamic mortgage, and at least that way, you're putting in effort to make the economic system you're coming to more Islamic in nature.
I went through one of them and just to study it and try to use it. The only one problem was the advance payment, which is 20%.
Yeah.
And with the average houses, 300,000 and above, you look at that amount and people say, oh, it's 5% in the conventional bank and it's 20%. If there's some way that this amount to be dropped, if you look at the mortgage and the other money, it's almost the same calculation between almost.
Yeah.
It's the terminology on the paper about shares or partners or whatever it is. But people don't think or don't look at that part. They look at another part. How much I'm going to pay to get an Islamic mortgage house.
Yeah.
This is it. And I hope, somebody will look at this and change it, because if it goes to 5% or even 10% like the other banks, people can afford it. But when it goes to 20%,
yeah, that's really expensive. So there are a couple of the ones based out of Toronto that do offer it at 5%. This group, Ijara is one of them. Zero Mortgage Halal also offers their Islamic mortgages at a 5% down payment. Now, with that, as you may know, comes the fee, CMHC, the Canadian Housing mortgage corporation. And so what that's going to mean is you're essentially going to have to buy insurance on the loan you're taking, right?
Yes.
So that basically protects the lender that if you default on your payments, they're not going to lose all their money.
Unless if you pay 35%.
Yeah, well, it's 20%, right? So the cutoff is 20%. If you put 20% down, you won't have to pay that CMHC insurance, which is likely why a lot of these Islamic mortgages have basically said 20% as a stipulation. Then you avoid insurance, which is another component which has a level of haram in there.
In this now, how can people contact you?
So the best way to contact me is through either email or phone number, which my email is jesse.reitberger@investorsgroup.com. My phone number is 204-599-4418. And they can also check me out on Facebook or Instagram. I have regular updates on Islamic finance and videos to teach you how to manage your finances properly here in Canada.
Jesse, thank you very much for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. Jazakallah khair.
Shukran.
Afwan.